Before we descend into the labyrinth of Cairo's streets and the high-stakes world of atomic espionage, if you enjoy uncovering the hidden chapters of history and the silent wars fought in the shadows, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a briefing on the operations that shaped our modern world. Now, let's open the file. The heat in Cairo was not merely a meteorological fact in the summer of 1963. It was a physical weight, a heavy blanket of dust, exhaust fumes, and the relentless baking sun that seemed to press down on the city's concrete and limestone. For the tourists marveling at the pyramids or haggling in the Khan el-Khalili market, the heat was part of the exotic charm. But for Avner, a man known to his Egyptian neighbors as a dull Swiss import-export businessman, the heat was a constant reminder that he was operating inside a pressure cooker that was about to explode. Avner sat on the balcony of his apartment in the Zamalek district, a cup of lukewarm tea in his hand, watching the feluccas drift lazily down the Nile. To the untrained eye, the scene was peaceful. To Avner, it was a theater of deception. The geopolitical tectonic plates were shifting beneath the sands of the Middle East. President Gamal Abdel Nasser was modernizing Egypt's military at a terrifying pace, but he wasn't doing it alone. He had help. The intelligence reports landing on desks in Tel Aviv were fragmentary but terrifying. They spoke of a new weapons program, hidden deep within the desert, shielded from aerial reconnaissance and conventional spying. The code name was the Meteor. The goal was simple and devastating: to develop ballistic missiles capable of carrying warheads, chemical, biological, or perhaps eventually nuclear, directly into the heart of Israel. But the Egyptians didn't have the technical expertise to build these guidance systems and propulsion engines from scratch. They had imported the talent. West German scientists, men who had once designed rockets for the Third Reich, were now living like kings in Cairo, working for Nasser. They were the ghosts of the past returning to haunt the future. Avner's mission, and the mission of the Mossad station in Cairo, had been to track these scientists, but it was proving impossible. The Germans were professionals. They knew they were targets. They lived in secure compounds, traveled in convoys with heavy security, and worked in underground bunkers that didn't appear on any map. "We are chasing shadows," Avner had wired back to headquarters the previous week, using a burst transmission from a modified radio hidden inside a hollowed-out vacuum cleaner. "We know they leave their villas in the morning. We know they return at night. But where they go in between is a black hole. We lose them in the traffic, or they vanish into military zones where we cannot follow." The reply from Tel Aviv had been cryptic. "New assets arriving. Prepare for a change in methodology. Science will light the way." Avner looked down at the street. A black Mercedes limousine with diplomatic plates glided past. He recognized the passenger, Dr. Hans Klein, an aerodynamics specialist. Klein was smiling, chatting with an Egyptian officer. They were going somewhere important, somewhere secret. And Avner, despite all his training, all his tradecraft, and all his frustration, had no way to follow them without being spotted. Conventional surveillance had failed. The Egyptians were too vigilant, the streets too crowded, the risk of exposure too high. He didn't know it yet, but the solution to his problem wasn't coming in the form of a new gun or a better camera. It was coming in a small, lead-lined vial, carrying a substance that would rewrite the rules of surveillance. The game of cat and mouse was about to enter the atomic age. 300 miles away, in a windowless sub-basement of a nondescript building in Tel Aviv, the air was cool, sterile, and smelled faintly of ozone and antiseptic. This was the domain of the professor, the head of Mossad's technical division. He was a man who viewed espionage not as an art, but as a physics problem. Sitting across from him was Eitan, a field operations commander who preferred the chaos of the street to the quiet of the lab. Eitan looked at the blackboard covered in equations and shook his head. "I need a way to see through walls, Professor," Eitan said, his voice gravelly from lack of sleep. "Not a chemistry lesson. My team in Cairo is blind. The scientists vanish into the desert, and if we follow too closely, the Mukhabarat, Egyptian intelligence, will pick us up. We need to know where the factory is." The professor smiled, a thin, wintry expression. He picked up a small glass jar. Inside was a fine, grayish powder, It looked like ordinary dust, perhaps soot from a fireplace. "This," the professor said softly, "is compound 74. It is a zinc-cadmium sulfide compound, treated with a very specific low-level radioactive isotope. It emits a gamma signature that is invisible to the eye, odorless to the nose, and undetectable by standard security sweeps, unless one is looking for this exact frequency." Eitan leaned forward, skeptical. "Radiation? You want my agents to carry radioactive material? Is it dangerous?" "In this quantity, negligible," the professor assured him. "You would get more radiation exposure walking in the sun for an hour. But to a calibrated Geiger counter, this dust sings like a soprano in an opera house. If this dust is on a person or a vehicle, we can track them from a distance of 300 meters, even through light structures. We can follow them without ever seeing them." Eitan's eyes narrowed as the tactical implications sank in. "We tag them." "Precisely," the professor nodded. "We don't need to plant a bulky transmitter that requires batteries and can be found during a search. We don't need to put a beacon on a car that can be inspected by mechanics. We simply need to introduce this dust onto their clothing, their shoes, or the carpets of their vehicles. It clings, it persists, and it broadcasts." "How long does it last?" "The half-life is sufficient for your needs. It will remain detectable for weeks, gradually fading. If a scientist walks through a secure facility wearing shoes treated with compound 74, he is literally painting a map of his movements for us. If he drives into a hidden bunker, the car leaves a trail." Eitan stood up, pacing the small room. The audacity of it appealed to him. It was a silent marker, a ghost trail. "The Germans, they are meticulous. They are clean. That is their weakness," the professor countered. "They care about appearances. They wear fine suits. They have their laundry done professionally. They polish their shoes. They are creatures of habit and vanity. So we target the vanity," Eitan mused. "The operation is approved," the professor said, handing Eitan a heavy, lead-lined briefcase. "Inside you will find the compound, the application kits, and 3 modified receivers. They look like standard transistor radios, popular in Egypt right now. But they are tuned to the song of the dust. Get this to Cairo, and tell your men not to spill it in their own apartments, or they will never be able to sleep securely again." Eitan took the case. It was heavier than it looked. It felt like holding the future of the Middle East in his hand. The plan was set. They wouldn't chase the scientists anymore. They would make the scientists lead them right to the heart of the secret. Cairo was a city of layers, where the ultra-modern collided with the ancient. In the upscale district of Zamalek, where the German scientists and Egyptian elite lived, appearances were everything. To maintain the lifestyle of a European gentleman in the heat of North Africa required logistical support. It required tailors, dry cleaners, and cobblers. Avner stood across the street from a shop with a simple, elegant sign, "Nabil's Bespoke, Tailoring and Fine Dry Cleaning." The windows were spotless, displaying mannequins dressed in sharp Italian-style suits. This was the choke point. According to the surveillance logs that Avner's team had painstakingly compiled over months, at least 4 of the key German scientists used this specific shop. They didn't trust the hotel laundry services with their expensive suits. They trusted Nabil. Nabil was a man in his 50s, a Coptic Christian who kept his head down and his needle sharp. He had no politics, only a dedication to fabric. He was the perfect unwitting vector. Inside the safe house a few blocks away, Avner briefed his team. There were 3 of them: Yael, a communications specialist who could pass for a French tourist; Danny, a logistics expert with hands that could pick any lock in Cairo; and Gideon, the tech specialist who would handle the radios. "We are not going to recruit Nabil," Avner said, pointing to the diagram of the shop on the wall. "He is too nervous, too honest. If we approach him, he might panic and go to the police. We have to do this without him knowing." "A break-in?" Danny asked, examining the lock schematic. "A silent entry," Avner corrected. "Tonight, the shop closes at 8 p.m. Nabil goes home to his family in Heliopolis. The street is busy until midnight, but the back alley is dark. Danny, you get us in. Gideon, you apply the compound to the specific garments we have identified. We know that Dr. Klein dropped off his gray dinner jacket yesterday. He is attending the Ministry of Defense Gala on Friday. That jacket must be treated. Is the substance stable? Gideon asked, looking at the lead container sitting on the table. As long as you don't inhale it or eat it, Avner said dryly. Use the gloves, use the brush. A fine layer on the hem of the trousers, the cuffs, and the soles of the shoes if they are there. It has to look like nothing. If the Egyptians catch us with this, Yael started, leaving the sentence unfinished. If they catch us, Avner said, his voice hard, they will think it is poison. They won't know it's a tracking device, but we won't be caught. We go in, we dust the target, we get out. The next day, Dr. Klein puts on his jacket, walks out of his house, and becomes a beacon. The tension in the room was palpable. They were used to cameras, microphones, invisible ink. But spreading radioactive material in a civilian shop felt different. It felt like crossing a line. But Avner remembered the intelligence reports, the blast radius of the missiles the Germans were building. If a little radioactive dust could prevent a Holocaust, it was a price they would pay. That night, the operation commenced. The alley behind the tailor shop smelled of rotting fruit and stray cats. Danny worked on the back door lock with the precision of a surgeon. A soft click echoed in the darkness. They were in. Inside, the shop smelled of steam, starch, and wool. Rows of plastic-wrapped suits hung like ghosts on the racks. Gideon moved quickly, his Geiger counter, disguised as a camera, clicked off. He found the ticket number corresponding to Dr. Klein. Ticket 405, Dr. H. Klein. Gideon carefully slit the plastic. He opened the lead canister. Inside, the gray dust seemed to absorb the scant light from their flashlights. With a specialized brush, he applied a microscopic layer to the fabric of the cuffs and the inner lining of the jacket. He dusted the shoes sitting on the rack below. Done, Gideon whispered. He's going to glow. They resealed the plastic. Danny locked the door behind them. As they melted back into the Cairo night, Avner checked his watch. The trap was set. Now, they just had to wait for the prey to dress himself in the target. The morning sun hit the white facade of Dr. Klein's villa, blindingly bright. 2 blocks away, sitting in a battered Peugeot taxi that had seen better days, Gideon sat with the receiver. It looked like he was listening to the Saut al-Arab radio station, nodding along to the music. In reality, he was wearing a single earpiece connected to the modified Geiger counter circuitry inside the radio case. Static, just the hiss of the city's background radiation. Then, at 08:45 a.m., a rhythmic click-click-click began to cut through the static. It was faint, but distinct. "Target is active," Gideon whispered into the collar of his shirt. Dr. Klein emerged from his front gate. He wasn't wearing the dinner jacket, that was for the evening, but he was wearing the shoes that Gideon had dusted the night before. Klein got into the back of his Mercedes. The car pulled away. "I have the signal," Gideon said. He started the Peugeot's engine. Signal strength 3 out of 10, he's moving south. This was the beauty of the system. In visual surveillance, you had to keep the target in sight. If he turned a corner, you had to turn. If he sped up, you sped up. It was aggressive and easily spotted by a trained counter-surveillance team. But with the dust, Gideon could hang back. He could let 3, 4, even 5 cars get between him and the Mercedes. He could drive on a parallel street. As long as the click-click-click remained steady, he still had the leash. They drove through the chaotic heart of Cairo, past the Tahrir Square, weaving through donkey carts and buses. The signal remained strong. The dust was doing its job. "He's heading for the Giza Road," Gideon reported. "Speed increasing. Stay with him." Avner's voice crackled in his ear. "But don't get burned. If he heads into the military zone, break off." The Mercedes picked up speed as it hit the desert highway. The landscape changed from urban gray to sandy beige. The heat shimmered off the asphalt. Gideon kept his distance. The clicking in his ear was a hypnotic metronome. "He is there. He is there. He is there." Suddenly, the Mercedes veered off the main highway onto an unmarked asphalt strip that cut straight into the dunes. There were no signs, only a guard post with a red and white barrier and 2 soldiers armed with Kalashnikovs. Gideon couldn't follow. If he turned onto that road, he would be stopped immediately. He kept driving straight on the main highway, watching the Mercedes disappear into the heat haze in his rearview mirror. I'm losing visual, Gideon said. He turned into Sector 4, restricted access. Hold your course, Avner commanded. Listen to the signal. How long can you hear him? Gideon turned up the gain on the receiver. The click, click, click began to fade. Click, 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 then silence. Signal lost, Gideon said, frustration seeping into his voice. He's out of range. About 4 kilometers inland from the highway turnoff. Mark the location, Avner said. We know the turnoff. That's a start. Tonight he wears the jacket. Tonight he goes to the city. We will see who he meets. They hadn't found the factory yet, but they had found the road. And in the world of intelligence, a road always leads somewhere. The dust had proven the concept. Now they had to escalate. The Ministry of Defense Gala at the Nile Hilton was the social event of the season. It was a projection of power, generals in medals, diplomats in sashes, and the German scientists, the guests of honor, mingling in the ballroom under crystal chandeliers. Avner couldn't get in. He wasn't on the list, but Yael was. Using a cover identity as a correspondent for a French fashion magazine, Yael had secured an invitation. Her mission wasn't to write an article. It was to get close to Dr. Klein. The dust on his jacket would be transmitting, but inside the crowded ballroom, the signal would be useless for tracking location. However, it was perfect for identification. Yael moved through the crowd, a glass of champagne in her hand. She wore a stunning evening gown, but in her clutch purse was a miniaturized version of the receiver. It would vibrate when she was within 2 meters of the isotope. She scanned the room. She saw generals laughing, their wives dripping in gold. She saw the German contingent standing together, looking slightly uncomfortable in the humid heat, despite the air conditioning. She spotted a man who matched Klein's description. Tall, balding, spectacles. He was wearing a gray dinner jacket. Yael drifted closer, engaging a Turkish diplomat in polite conversation while inching toward the Germans. Psst, psst, psst. The purse vibrated against her palm. Strong, consistent. She was close. This was Klein, and he was radioactive. She watched him. He wasn't talking about aerodynamics or propulsion. He was talking about the opera. But then a man approached him, an Egyptian civilian, sharp-featured, carrying a leather briefcase. The vibration stopped as Klein moved away to talk to the newcomer in a quiet corner. Yael excused herself and flanked the room, trying to get a line of sight. The Egyptian handed Klein an envelope. Klein handed the Egyptian a set of keys. It was a subtle exchange, done in plain sight but shielded by the bodies of waiters passing with trays. Yael memorized the Egyptian's face. This was a new player. Was he the money man, the liaison, or perhaps the logistics officer for the secret site? As Klein turned to leave the corner, he brushed past a heavy velvet curtain. Yael saw a faint smudge on the fabric where his sleeve had touched. The dust was transferring. It was leaving a physical trail. She realized the potential immediately. If Klein went into a secure room, he would contaminate the chair he sat in, the handle of the door he opened. She waited until Klein returned to the main group. Then, casually, she walked past the spot where the exchange had happened. She pretended to stumble slightly, steadying herself against the wall where the Egyptian man had been leaning. She didn't have a detector on the Egyptian, but if the transfer theory held, Klein might have contaminated him just by shaking hands or passing the keys. It was a long shot, but espionage was built on long shots. She left the party at midnight. In the safe house, she sketched the face of the Egyptian contact. That, Avner said, looking at the sketch, is Colonel Ali Shafik. He's procurement. If Klein is giving him keys, it means Shafik is handling the materials for the project. Klein is glowing, Yael said, but the signal is blocked by the hotel walls. We need to get the receiver closer to the source, closer to the factory. We go to the desert, Avner decided. We know the turnoff. We need to see where the road ends. The desert at night was a deceptive void. It looked empty, but sound carried for miles, and the light of the moon turned the dunes into a landscape of stark contrasts. 2 nights after the gala, Avner and Gideon lay on a ridge overlooking the military road they had identified. They were 5 kilometers from the highway, deep in the restricted zone. They had hiked in under the cover of darkness, avoiding the patrols. They were camouflaged, covered in sand-colored netting. Beside them sat a high-gain directional antenna, shaped like a satellite dish, pointed toward the horizon where the road disappeared into a cluster of rocky hills. "Anything?" Avner whispered. "Background radiation is higher here," Gideon noted, adjusting the dials. "Granite rocks, but no artificial signal." They waited. The cold of the desert night seeped into their bones. This was the unglamorous reality of spycraft, lying in the dirt, waiting for a beep. At 02:00 a.m., headlights appeared in the distance. A convoy, 3 trucks, and a lead jeep. "Here they come," Avner said. "Get ready." Gideon aimed the dish. The vehicles were 2 kilometers away, moving toward the hills. Click, 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 click. "I have it," Gideon hissed. "One of the trucks. It's carrying something. Or someone who visited the tailor." "It's not a person," Avner realized, watching through his binoculars. "Those are supply trucks, covered beds. If the scientist sat in the passenger seat or if his contaminated clothes were packed in luggage." The signal is moving away, entering the canyon. They tracked the sound. The clicks accelerated as the dish focused on the source. Then, abruptly, the signal cut out. "Lost it," Gideon said. It didn't fade. It cut, like a door closing. "They went underground," Avner said, lowering his binoculars. "Into the hill. That's it. That's the facility." They had the location. A hollowed-out mountain complex, invisible from the air, shielded by rock. But finding the door wasn't enough. They needed to know what was inside. They needed proof of the missiles to show the world, to force the German government to intervene and pull their scientists out. "We need to get inside," Gideon said, packing up the gear. "No," Avner said, a dangerous idea forming in his mind. "We can't get inside. It's a fortress. But we can make the inside come to us." "How?" "The dust," Avner smiled in the dark. "It travels. It sticks. We don't just track them with it. We use it to map the ventilation. If the facility was underground, it needed air. Massive air exchanges to keep the scientists alive and to vent the toxic fumes of rocket fuel. If they could find the exhaust vents, they could sample the air. And if the air contained traces of the dust, or better yet, traces of rocket propellant, they would have their smoking gun. The plan was madness, but it was the only option left. They had to get closer to the mountain base, locate the ventilation shafts, and place sniffers, air sampling units, to capture the chemical signature of the facility. But the area was patrolled by Bedouin trackers employed by the Egyptian army. These men knew every stone in the desert. They would spot a footprint instantly. "We don't walk," Avner told the team. "We glide." They would use the wind. A dark, moonless night with a heavy sandstorm forecast. The storm would ground the Egyptian patrols and cover their tracks. It was dangerous. They could get lost and die of exposure. But it was the only cover that guaranteed invisibility. Danny, the logistics expert, modified their gear. Goggles, face wraps, and specialized boots with smooth soles that left no tread marks, mimicking the shifting sands. They drove to the drop-off point. The wind was already howling, whipping sand into a frenzy. Visibility was 0. "Stay close," Avner shouted over the wind. "Tether line." They tied themselves together with a thin nylon rope. Gideon carried the Geiger counter and the air samplers. They moved into the storm, walking blindly towards the coordinates of the lost signal. The sand stung their skin like needles. They navigated by compass and sheer will. After 2 hours of struggling against the gale, the Geiger counter in Gideon's headset began to scream. Click, 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 click. "We are on top of it," Gideon yelled. "The signal is coming from below us." They were standing on the roof of the facility. The radioactive dust, tracked into the base by the scientists, was radiating up through the thinner rock or a shaft. They searched the ground, crawling on hands and knees. Avner found it, a concrete grate, half buried in the sand, spewing warm, foul-smelling air. The exhaust vent. Gideon deployed the sniffer. He placed a filter paper over the vent. The machine sucked in the air, trapping particulates. 2 minutes, Gideon shouted. "That's all we need." The machine hummed. The storm raged around them. They were ghosts harvesting the breath of the dragon. Suddenly, the ground shook. A low rumble, distinct from the wind. A test. They were testing an engine underground. Static fire, Avner realized. They are firing a rocket motor. The vibration was intense. The air coming from the vent turned hot and acrid. The sniffer was collecting gold. Pure combustion byproducts of rocket fuel. Got it. Gideon sealed the sample. Let's go. They turned back into the storm, letting the wind erase their presence. They had the radiation signature, and now they had the chemical fingerprint. The samples made it back to Tel Aviv. The analysis was conclusive. The chemicals were unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide, rocket fuel components. The radiation signature matched the batch of compound 74. They had proof that the German scientists were building advanced ballistic missiles in a secret facility in the Egyptian desert. But Israel couldn't just bomb the facility. The political fallout would be catastrophic. The scientists were West German citizens. Killing them would destroy relations with Europe. Bombing Egypt could trigger a full-scale war that Israel wasn't ready for yet. The decision was made to wage a war of nerves, psychological warfare. We need to make the scientists want to leave, the Mossad director ordered. We need to make them feel unsafe. We need to show them we can touch them anywhere. The operation shifted from Cairo to Europe. The scientists had families in Germany. They had bank accounts in Switzerland. They had lives they wanted to return to. Avner was sent to Munich. His target was the wife of Dr. Klein. He didn't hurt her. He didn't even speak to her. He simply mailed her a package. Inside was a letter, postmarked from Cairo. The letter contained no threats. It contained a photograph of her husband, Dr. Klein, walking out of the tailor shop in Zamalek. And clipped to the photo was a piece of fabric, a swatch from the hem of a dinner jacket. The swatch was slightly radioactive. Not enough to harm, but enough to trigger a Geiger counter if anyone checked. The message was clear. We are close enough to cut your husband's clothes. We are close enough to poison him. We are everywhere. Simultaneously in Cairo, the hauntings began. The scientists would come home to find their furniture rearranged. Nothing stolen, just moved. A book left open on a specific page, a clock set to a different time, and always a faint trace of dust left on the pillow. The scientists, rational men of logic and physics, began to fray. They demanded better security. They accused the Egyptian guards of spying on them. Paranoia set in. The work slowed down. The team was fracturing. The psychological pressure cooker finally burst. One of the younger engineers, a man named Hempel, cracked. He couldn't take the feeling of being watched. He contacted the West German embassy in Cairo, demanding evacuation. Avner, back in Cairo, intercepted the communication. We have an opportunity, Avner told his team. Hempel wants out. If we help him, he gives us the blueprints. He gives us the targeting data. Or it's a trap, Yael warned. It's a risk we take. They arranged a meet, not in a dark alley, but in the chaos of the Khan el-Khalili market. Hempel was terrified. He was sweating profusely, looking over his shoulder every second. They are crazy, Hempel whispered to Avner, who was posing as a German tourist. Nasser wants the rockets ready by the end of the year. They are bypassing safety protocols. The fuel is unstable. If they launch, it might blow up on the pad, or it might hit Tel Aviv. It's a coin toss. We can get you out, Avner said calmly, but we need the schematics. I have them. Hempel tapped his chest. Microfilm, in my lining. Tonight, the tailor shop. Leave the jacket with the yellow tag. We will handle the rest. It was full circle. The tailor shop, where the operation had begun with dust, would now be the site of the handover. But the Egyptians were watching Hempel. They suspected he was a flight risk. That night, as Hempel approached the shop, the street erupted. Egyptian security officers in plain clothes swarmed him. Hempel shouted. He tried to run. Avner, watching from a car down the street, cursed. Abort! Get out! He watched helplessly as Hempel was dragged into a black sedan. The microfilm was gone. The engineer was gone. The operation had hit a wall. They had the location. They had the fear. But they had lost the detailed plans. And now, the Egyptians knew there was a leak. Security would lock down tight. The dust tracking would no longer work. The scientists would likely be moved to quarters inside the base, never to leave. The capture of Hempel changed the calculus. Israel could no longer wait for a slow psychological victory. The missiles were unstable and imminent. The Prime Minister of Israel authorized a different approach. Diplomacy, armed with the undeniable proof gathered by Avner's team. A secret dossier was compiled. It contained the maps generated by the radioactive tracking. It contained the chemical analysis of the air samples. It contained the photos of the scientists. This dossier was not sent to the press. It was placed on the desk of the West German Chancellor and the U.S. Secretary of State. The message was blunt. Egypt is building weapons of mass destruction with the help of your citizens. We know exactly where they are. If you do not recall your scientists and stop this program, Israel will be forced to take kinetic action. We will destroy the facility, and we cannot guarantee the safety of the German nationals inside. It was a bluff, partially. Israel didn't want to bomb. But the intelligence was so precise, so undeniable, that the Western powers had to act. They could not afford a new war in the Middle East sparked by ex-Nazi scientists. The pressure came down on Cairo like a hammer. West Germany threatened to cut off all economic aid. The U.S. exerted diplomatic leverage on Nasser, but the scientists were paid well. Some refused to leave, so Mossad played its final card. The letter bomb campaign. It wasn't about killing, it was about precision. Small targeted explosives were sent not to the scientists, but to the administrative offices of the project in Germany and Cairo. They were warnings, loud, kinetic warnings. The dust has let us see you. The next package won't miss. In the fall of 1963, the convoy of Mercedes limousines left the Zamalek district for the last time, but they weren't heading to the desert factory. They were heading to Cairo International Airport. Avner stood on the observation deck, watching through a pair of sunglasses. He saw Dr. Klein. He saw the others. They looked defeated, tired, and old. They carried their luggage, leaving behind the dream of a desert superweapon. The Egyptian officers watching them go looked furious, but helpless. Without the German expertise, the Meteor program was just a pile of expensive metal and volatile fuel. It would rust in the sand. Avner felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Gideon. "The shop is clean," Gideon said quietly. "We removed the remaining compound 74. Nabil never knew a thing. And the radiation levels? Back to background normal. The trail is gone." The scientists boarded the Lufthansa flight. As the plane lifted off, banking over the Nile, the threat evaporated. It hadn't been destroyed by bombs or commandos. It had been dismantled by chemistry, physics, and the terrifying realization that there was nowhere to hide. Years later, Avner walked through a museum in Tel Aviv. There was a small exhibit on the history of Israeli intelligence. Behind a glass case, tucked away in a corner, was a simple old-fashioned transistor radio and a small lead vial. The placard read simply, "Surveillance equipment, circa 1960s. No mention of the German scientists, no mention of the rockets, no mention of the radioactive dust that had painted a target on the backs of Israel's enemies." Avner smiled. The best victories were the ones nobody knew about, the ones where the war was prevented before the first shot was fired. He walked out of the museum into the bright Tel Aviv sunlight. The city was bustling, alive, safe. People were drinking coffee, rushing to work, playing on the beaches. They had no idea how close the shadow had come. The dust had settled, but in the world of shadows, there was always a new storm gathering. The spy war never truly ended. It just changed frequencies. Avner checked his watch. He had a meeting. New threats were emerging in the north. New technologies were needed. The game continued. If this story of high-stakes espionage and scientific tradecraft kept you on the edge of your seat, please don't forget to like the video and share it with others. The history of intelligence is vast, and we have many more files to declassify. Subscribe so you don't miss the next operation.